Welcome to the Hollywood Scholar. I'm Jed Morgan, and I just finished House of the Dragon, Episode 7, Driftmark. And I gotta say, this is without doubt my favorite episode of the series so far, and a lot of the criticisms that I had for the last episode, specifically with the actor swap and stuff like that, doesn't hold as much ground, or I don't place as much importance on in this episode, specifically with the actor swap and really just there, because this version of Alicent and Rhaenyra, I still vehemently say that they are completely different characters that have nothing related to the younger versions, but I've come to like these new versions in and of themselves if I can completely divorce the younger versions, which I still do prefer, but I liked a lot of the dynamics that were going on in this episode, and there were a lot of pretenses that were dropped, specifically with Rhaenyra. She's no longer the innocent child who seems to be implicitly good in the story, with that being contradicted by some of her actions. Now it's very clear what type of person she is, and she's just like everybody else. And I quite like that development that they did with her in Driftmark. There was so many great moments of dialogue and a lot of great conversations that I really enjoyed. The action was rather light, but what action Driftmark did have was visceral and compelling. And one scene in particular, the action was way over the top, and that damages the scene that follows and the drama that came from that over the top action, but I'll get into that in a moment. Overall, Driftmark is just a really solid episode of television that fully has me reinvested into this series, and I'm looking forward to the Targaryen Civil War, which is coming in the last 3 episodes of this series. I am a little disappointed that they waited this long for things to happen and it actually to be the Civil War. Looks like there's going to be another major time jump in the next episode, episode 8, but things are finally happening, and I really enjoyed this episode. There was just so much great intrigue involved that it was above and beyond the rest of its episodes so far in House of the Dragon. But before I get any further, there will be spoilers ahead, so spoiler alert. This entire episode centers around the funeral of the Sea Snake's daughter, who was married to Daemon in the last episode, and a lot of people coming together who haven't met in years. Some in over 10 years, Daemon meeting Rhaenyra again for the first time in a long time, and they had a lot of great interactions there. Daemon and Viserys, a lot of meeting, a lot of trying to figure out how things are after that long, and just the funeral scene and the wake specifically, there are great moments of dialogue. After the funeral, the second son of Alicent and King Viserys goes out in search of the biggest dragon, Vhagar, who is now riderless after the death of his rider at the end of the last episode. And he's been bullied in the past, so he wants a dragon. And the biggest dragon of all is a very good one for him to claim. And so he does so, which is in a great scene. I really like dragon claiming moments, really remind me of How to Train Your Dragon. And that's one of my favorite animated movies. It was just pure fun watching him ride that dragon. And I want to briefly mention Aemond here. He was really my least favorite of the children involved in the last episode, of like Rhaenyra's kids and Alicent's kids and Daemon's kids. He was my least favorite out of pretty much all of them because he didn't really have much going on with him. But after this sequence and a few of the scenes after this, he's quickly become my favorite because he's not just the whiny brat we saw before. Taking Vhagar gave him a marked change in personality, which made sense. And I really like the change. And I'm not sure I'm going to like the new actor playing Aemond in the next episode, but for this episode, the last half of it, I was really enjoying what I was seeing with his character and the decisions he was making and the lack of fear that he showed in certain situations. There's some really great stuff with Aemond, and a lot of those things kind of apply to all the other characters as well. Everyone made sense and made decisions based on the previously established character. There was no moment where I looked at the screen and like, yeah, that doesn't really make sense for that person to do that or this or that. And I really appreciated that. After that, the daughters of the original Vhagar rider get very upset at Aemond for claiming their mother's dragon. So there's a fight, and this fight is what I was talking about earlier with it was being a little over the top. These are children, some of them under the age of 10, and even before weapons come out, the rock and the knife, they're like drawing immense amounts of blood. Like the 2 sons of Rhaenyra, they're covered in Aemon's blood before he grabs a rock. And he is, to a certain extent, justified because he was attacked first. I mean, he did steal their mother's dragon, but they went for it hard. And I kind of feel bad for the kid. And it was kind of cool to see the 2 brothers working together, which ultimately blinded Aemon. Like the one throwing dust in his eye while the other one slashed him. It was cool, but the age of the kids definitely seemed like it they wouldn't have been able to pull off a fight scene like that in real life. I mean, have you ever seen kids fight? I mean, I was a kid once, and fight scenes end up a little bit differently, at least in my experience. But overall, it wasn't a super big deal. It didn't distract from the great dialogue, which is usually my priority. And it did hurt the next scene a tad because of how bad that fight scene was and how overblown and dramatized it was. It kind of made the subsequent scene feel that way to a certain extent as well. But overall, if I took that scene in the fight between the kids at face value, the decisions of the parents in the next scenes followed logically based on their characters. So as long as you can get over the fact that these kids are way more experienced in fighting than they should be for their age, you can kind of accept the chain of events and the decisions that characters make. And that's where Rhaenyra and Alicent's confrontation really come to a head. The series is caught in the middle. He's just wanting to make peace. And eventually Alicent just draws a knife and tries to kill Rhaenyra. She's hurt, and that's kind of enough. And Aemon has one of my favorite lines of the episode. He's like, it's a fair trade, mother. Don't feel pity for me. I may have lost an eye, but I gained a dragon. And it wasn't exactly like that, but that was the point of it. And I really liked seeing Aemon do that. His change. He's like, yeah, I lost an eye, but I got freaking Vhagar. And it was just really cool to see that development for him. In the episode, there's some more manipulation going on with Alicent and Larys, Viserys, and Otto Hightower's back in the episode. He was a great addition to the early ones, and I'm glad he's back. He's definitely a very intelligent person, so I like his character being reintroduced into the series after the time jump, and some great little interactions with people manipulating each other there. And it ultimately ends with Rhaenyra and Daemon getting a sort of alliance going on, ending in their marriage after faking the death of her husband, Laenor. And I didn't see that ending coming. I'm going to be honest with you guys. And I don't know what happened in the books, but it felt like they made sure Laenor survived for kind of not to make Rhaenyra a super bad character. I mean, like, at this point, all pretenses are aside, and she's just as bad as everybody else. But I felt like it was just a little bit of damage control with her, and a little bit because the series has gotten a lot of, homophobic criticism over the years. So I didn't think they want to kill another gay person on screen. I don't know if that was in the books, but I think it would have been better for the story if he had actually been killed in the fireplace, and more poetic considering Rhaenyra was talking about we're fire, we're not water, we burn everything in our path. So I prefer him dying, but it was a neat twist at the end that I wasn't too begrudging of the showrunners to choose. And speaking of the showrunners, the behind the scenes at the end of the episode actually wasn't bad. This was the first time that it didn't feel like they were trying to destroy the episode and make you think of overly politicized stuff. The director really didn't talk in the interviews. I don't know who directed this episode. And even Miguel Sapochnik just talked about the story. And it makes sense. This was a very story-rich episode with a lot of character development, so there was a lot to talk about. But the behind the scenes are actually not hard to watch, and that's been very surprising. Now, just a few things that I really, really did like. The funeral conversation with people. Apparently, it was the first scene that they filmed, so everyone's a little awkward around each other, just giving each other furtive glances, and there's minimal dialogue through much of this portion of the episode, and I got what everyone was thinking and enjoyed the interactions they had. And following off of that, Rhaenyra and Daemon's beach scene, where they're talking about how she feels abandoned. And it is dramatized, but makes sense for her character. Like, Daemon didn't technically abandon her, but it makes sense why she feels that way, especially in that just some really great conversations that they had. And that's really a highlight of this episode, is there was some top tier dialogue. Even Daemon just snarkily commenting, calling Otto a leech, I really enjoyed. And that was a non sequitur. Like, Rings of Power, I've criticized a lot of their non sequiturs, but that was one that followed. Like, Daemon's disgust for Otto overrode whatever good graces that Otto was trying to give his well wishes or sympathies. And it made sense for his character. It was a non sequitur that made sense in context with the characters involved. So sometimes it can't absolutely work to have non sequiturs. And this is definitely a moment of that. And the portion of the episode which had some of the greatest moments and some of the worst moments was the interrogation scene after the kids fought and Aemond was blinded. And there was just some characters who were acting a little bombastic and over the top, some who were just reacting normally, and there were some great lines like Rhaenyra saying now they see you for who you truly are, and the shock on Allison's face, like she's just as surprised as everyone else to see that she's capable of this, and the fact that she realizes that is what makes her certain that she's going to fight to the very end for the throne for her children, as Otto later on points out. Overall, I do think that interrogation scene is more towards the positive side, though there are some minor issues with it. It was just a really enjoyable episode that I felt intelligent watching. Like I was picking up stuff that wasn't upfront. I was having to guess the motivations using the evidence that they provided in previous episodes, and everyone followed in a logical manner from the previous episodes and the decisions in this episode. My primary criticism of Driftmark was it was too dark. I don't know what it is with Game of Thrones and really Rings of Power actually as well, is they just always shoot things way too dark. I can hardly see anything, and I watched the episode at night in the dark with my TV up to the brightest settings, and I really couldn't see a lot of the scenes that took place on the beach, like with Rhaenyra and Daemon. That's when it was the worst, and for portions of Aemon's flight, like getting Vhagar initially, there's some really rough stuff there. Overall, Driftmark is easily my favorite episode. I'd have to give it a 7 out of 10. There are still issues with it, and I'm not a fan of some of these new actors and actresses, specifically Emma Darcy. Still comes across as a blank of wood to me, but Allison, the new Allison, is actually growing on me, and I prefer the younger Allison, but this is a different character, and if I think of it as a different character, I'm beginning to like what this new Allison represents. It's just disconnect the ties because there isn't any logical ties between the two versions of the character, but they're good for their own reasons nonetheless. And I am very much looking forward to seeing how this conflict between Alicent and Rhaenyra will go into the future. And Daemon, of course, is by far the best part of this episode. As always, he really got the most to do that he's had in a very long time in this series, because he's been a minor portion, but always been the best part. And Viserys, I don't know how Viserys is still alive. I thought he was going to die like 4 episodes ago, but he's still alive and kicking. Shockingly. I don't know how, but he's still going. So and these characters, I'm invested in many of them, and which is surprising because the last 2 episodes especially were really trying to destroy that investment that I had, and I was nearly out after episode 5. Episode 6 was fine, but it wasn't enough to reignite my passion for the series that I'd gained in episodes 3 and 4. This episode was, and I'm fully immersed, ready to see where the series takes us with the Targaryen Civil War coming up in episode 8. But anyway, that's all I have for today. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Please like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video. Anon. If you like what I do here and want to see good, compelling stories that Hollywood will no longer give you, check out my book series, Odyssey of a Phoenix, a mythological epic about philosophy, morality, and modern-day mental illness issues. Books 1, Down in Flames, and Book 2, Apocalypse Then, currently on sale. Book 3, Kill the Dark, coming soon.